So remember in September when I said I was gonna read less books this month? Yeah, I lied. Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. My name is Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. I'm in a blanket because it is fucking freezing in my house. I think the building is just old and my windows suck. So even though we have the heat on, it's not really like insulated properly. I also don't know how the lighting is for this video, but I'm hoping it's okay. I could film at my desk again, but I kind of like sitting on the floor. It's a little cozier. I am so cold. I'm just gonna be like tunneling into this blanket all video, so I'm just making you aware of that. So, October was a month. We already have snow here because pretty much Halloween ends and then the weather just goes, yup, time for winter now. So that's what's been going on here. I think I read 15 books this month. The last book I'm including, I technically finished it in November, but I finished it, I was like working and like the time switched over, so it was like, I finished it at like 2 a.m. on November 1st. So it counts. I can't really do a hair flip because my hair is in a ponytail. Wow, this video is a chaotic disaster and we're 2 minutes in. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm gonna be fine. So cold. So cold. Okay, shutting up. Getting to the point. Working on videos. Okay, so the very first book I read this month was Loveless by Alice Oseman. Unfortunately, I don't have like the tangible copies of a lot of these books because I took a bunch of them home over reading week, so I have more room on my bookshelf here for the new books that I've gotten. So Loveless is the story of Georgia War. As she goes to her first year of university, she like loves fan fiction and romance and just, you know, all that good stuff. And then all of a sudden she kind of comes up against these terms of being like asexual and aromantic, and she starts to realize that maybe this kind of like happily ever after she imagined for herself might look different than what she originally thought. It's an aro ace coming of age story, finding yourself, and I gave it 5 stars, but I don't think I've ever felt like as conflicted of, I don't want to use the word conflicted. I don't think I've ever had like that reaction to a 5-star read before. A lot of the times if it's a 5-star read, I'm like crying when I'm reading the book, or I'm like super happy, I'm loving it, I'm constantly like highlighting or like taking notes about quotations. And I think there was so much in this book that was inherently personal to me and just like where I am in my life right now, that like sometimes I would finish reading portions of the book and I'd just feel sad, which like isn't a bad thing because I really appreciate that Alice does a great job with this book from like not shying away from the difficult parts of like accepting yourself and going on that journey, which I think is really important. There's a particular scene in the book where it's just Georgia's like just having a rough day and she's like, you know, sometimes I get really upset about all these things that I feel like I'm going to miss out on, and she's like, I'm just trying to be as honest as I can about this, and like today sucks. And like that section just really like hit home with me because I think a lot of times when you're trying to find your identity and you're trying to come to terms with it, it can be really disheartening to have those days, but those days are like totally acceptable and valid and normal and everyone goes through them. So it's really important to take some time to acknowledge that, and the fact that Alice took the time to acknowledge that in that book is amazing. I would highly recommend this book. We need more asexual representation in literature, aromantic representation in literature. I think especially in the YA genre because the bulk of it does tend to be romance, and in recent years we've really been like queering that narrative with a lot of authors coming out with a lot of really good books that feature like LGBTQ+ people. Unfortunately that A gets left out a lot, whether it's agender, aromantic, or asexual, so it's really amazing to see this kind of representation out there. Read it. We love Alice Oseman. It's also an Own Voices book because Alice herself is aro ace, so that's just extra awesome, extra great. We love. Oh my gosh, my nose is gonna start running because I'm so cold. I should just wear a snowsuit for this video. Next book is Anxious People. So Anxious People is the story of a bank robbery gone wrong. So essentially, someone tries to rob a bank. The bank doesn't actually have any money because it's a cashless bank, and they end up taking all these people hostage in an apartment showing. It is written by Frederick Bachman, who is one of my all-time favorite authors. Right off the bat, we're doing 2 books by my all-time favorite authors. I don't think it's like my favorite book by him by any means. I think it's my favorite would still be A Man Called Ove, or My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologies. But she's up there. She's a good book. Frederick Bachman just has this way of writing things that is so beautiful and it is so well written. I know that they're translated from Swedish, but I'm like, it's just the way that he says things sometimes. If I can just find an example real quick. Oh, it just hurts so much. Sometimes being human is a line from the book. One of my favorite ones is this one. God doesn't protect people from knives, sweetheart. That's why God gave us other people, so we can protect each other. And this very last one, oh, right in the heart. He was my echo. Everything I do is quieter now. He just has this way, like that one really reminds me of the line in A Man Called Ove where it's like his world was black and white, but she was like his color, all of it, or something like that. I know I'm quoting it wrong. But just the way that he's able to have you like visualize and understand these characters. And I think that's one of the biggest things in this book is, and within all of Frederick Bachman's writing, is they are character driven novels, and it's really driven by the strength of these like kind of quirky different characters. This book itself does deal with some topics of suicide and suicidal ideation, so obviously just a content warning out there for people that content might be triggering for. But I would definitely recommend taking the time to check out this book. It's about learning how to care for others and like recognizing the best of our humanity that we have in us. The ending really like hit home with me with a lot of the pieces that came together at the end, which I really liked. Definitely check that one out. I don't know if I gave it 4 or 5 stars, but if it wasn't 5 stars, it was probably 4.5. After that, I read a manga, which I haven't read one in a while. It's always like getting my brain back into like what way we need to like go through the book. And this one is called My Brother's Husband by, I'm gonna apologize right now because I'm probably gonna butcher the name, Kengoro Tagami. I hope I said that right. I'm sorry if I didn't. If I butcher any of these names, please call me out. I'm doing my best. So Yachi is this stay-at-home father who lives in Tokyo with his daughter Kana. And one day this burly Canadian man, because we love some Canadian rep, Mike, shows up on his doorstep and he says that he is the widower of Yachi's estranged gay twin Ryoji. This book, we gave it 5 stars because the conversations that happen in this book about family and about sexuality and about the way that we talk about sexuality like with our children and with other people is so fascinating to me, especially because the book, it takes place in Japan and it like functions a lot around the way that those conversations navigate in Japan. I'm not Japanese, so I don't really know a lot about that, but that was really interesting to me. Especially the duality between Yachi and his daughter Kana, because when Mike says these things like, oh, you know, like I was married to your dad's brother, she's like, 2 men can get married, and he's just like, yeah, they can. And Kana is like, all right, cool, new piece of information, and just like moves on with it like kids do. But Yachi's having like a really hard time grappling with this and try to like realize if he has some sort of internalized homophobia or like the thoughts and things that he might be thinking about Mike that aren't actually true, that are based off of stereotypes and things like that. And it becomes a story of acceptance as well, because I think one of the things that's really interesting and really important to have is like accepting someone for who they are isn't always black and white. A lot of times you can get into this like really weird gray area where it's like, well, I accept you, but we're just never going to talk about it again. And it's like, is that really acceptance? And what it means to like fully embrace someone as a part of your family and a part of your chosen family, and the ways in which family can look different and it can change for everyone. It's a beautiful story. I absolutely recommend. I loved it. I I don't have the copy of it because I left it at home, but I have so many sticky notes in it from like these like beautiful little moments and these quotes that happen in it, and it's such a phenomenal, important story. So I would highly, highly recommend that you check that one out. I feel like most of this video is just me being like, I highly recommend this. And we're 11 minutes in and I have like 12 more books to talk about. The next book that I read is Fire Song, and Fire Song is written by Adam Garnett Jones, who is a First Nations Canadian author. It's actually based off of a film of the same name. I haven't watched the film, I've only read the book. So it follows Shane after the suicide of his sister Destiny, so obviously trigger content warning there. And he is also in a secret relationship with one of Destiny's close friends, David. David doesn't really want to be out to the people in the reserve. He doesn't really know how that's going to be perceived, and he doesn't want to lose the relationships with his family. And Shane is looking to get off of the reserve and get into a university and kind of away from the community where he hopes that things will be better and he might be able to live a different life. So it's a story about grief and about love and about the possibilities of things in the world. I did have some problems with this book with the way some of the secondary characters are characterized. Just that some of the trauma and the difficult things that they go through gets brushed aside a little bit, and I don't know if the book handles that as delicately as it should. But overall I did give it 5 stars because I think the characters are really interesting, and also I think that a lot of these conversations, particularly framed in Indigenous contexts, aren't always talked about. And the way that like the intersectionality of that can get really complicated, because for Indigenous people, like Two-Spirit was something that was incredibly traditional to us and was like an important part of our communities, and through colonization a lot of that belief and those ways of thinking have been lost. And unfortunately that means that like a lot of queer individuals, especially on remote reserves, can really suffer from homophobia and discrimination, and I think it's really important to have authors taking the time to embrace that and tackle it head on, like in this book. So that is another YA novel. Gave it about 4 stars, but good read. After this, I read the play Manfred for class, and this is written by Lord Byron, who is one of the wildest people in history. I swear, one of like the craziest authors. I found a post on Tumblr the other day that was talking about Shelley and Keats hadn't heard from him in a while, so I guess Mary Shelley went out to go and try and find him, and she like literally just found him dehydrated and malnourished because he was just banging people left, right, and center. Wasn't taking time to like drink water and feed himself. So if that doesn't give you an idea of what kind of person he was, I don't know what else to tell you. But Manfred is a drama that follows a character named Manfred, surprisingly, as he is trying to kind of grapple with the loss of someone important in his life, and he is kind of interviewing all these spirits and these otherworldly sources in hopes of finding answers for the pain and the grief that he is going through. So I was reading this for class, and honestly, like most of my notes was just me writing down quotations from it that I absolutely loved, and I feel like I'm going to use any excuse that I can in this class to write about it. So if you can't tell, I gave it 5 stars. It's very much like, it's that like introspective, like who am I, what does the world mean type stuff, which I love. I'm like a complete sucker for like that Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath type vibe, I guess, a little bit with introspection. I don't know if that makes any sense. That might be sacrilegious to compare those people, but just to give you an example is this one I really love. Upon itself there is no future pang, can deal that justice on the self-condemned, he deals on his own soul. So that idea that if you hate yourself and you're putting all this pressure and damnation on yourself, it doesn't matter what anyone else tells you or hatred they throw at you, because it can't be anything worse than your own critique, which I think is really fascinating. This one too, but I have found our thoughts take wildest flight, even at the moment when they should array themselves in pensive order. As someone with anxiety, I really understand that, because I'm like, yes, sometimes everything should be coming together in ways that it just doesn't. So we love that play. It is great. I never know whether I'm gonna like historical things that I'm reading, so it's always like a 2 thumbs up when I can actually read something historical and enjoy it. The next book that I read was The Rest of Us Just Live Here, which is by Patrick Ness. And I gave this one 3 stars. These next couple books actually I talk about in my reading vlog, which I will link here. So I'm going to be kind of brief about them just in order to save a little bit of time and because I've already touched on them a bit. So this follows Mikey and his group of friends as they're trying to finish up their last year of high school. And they live in a town in a world in which magic and like these crazy things do happen, but it's not to them. Like they are the chosen people. They're not the ones who are going through all of this. And I really struggled with that because you're supposed to feel like you're reading a book about like not the heroes, but it just felt so weird to have these like them like reference offhand zombies or vampires and just act like it was totally normal. Magical realism I find is really difficult to do, and that was something that I didn't feel was communicated as best through this novel, but it was still enjoyable and it does have some great depictions of mental illness, so I did give it 3 stars, but I've read much better by Patrick Ness. So the next book I read was called Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. And it follows Eliza, who is this creator of this very popular online webcomic, I guess is what you would call it. So this book reminded me a lot of Radio Silence in the sense that we have someone who is the creator of it, and then she encounters Wallace at school, who ends up being a huge fan who writes a lot of fan fiction for it, and then of course things go sideways when her secret identity is accidentally shared with the world and she's essentially outed as the creator of this comic. I loved this book, especially as Eliza kind of falls into a depression later in the novel. The representation of that is beautiful, but also just so much of the conversations about what it means to be a creator and a creative and to have that work represent everything about you. There's also some really interesting family conversations in terms of having a family that is supportive but doesn't always recognize the parts of yourself that you feel are like the most important or need a lot of respect or acknowledgement. I was constantly making notes about quotations that I wanted to read for this. I literally stayed up till like 2 a.m. finishing this book, and then the next morning when I was copying them out before I had to take the book back to the library, my dad was like, "Are you just writing out the entire book again?" And I was like, "No, but I love this book so much that I needed to write a lot about it." After that, we read The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock, which I also did a film to book comparison of that, so I will link that here. That is a very character-driven novel that follows all these characters in, I believe it's like the 1960s in the States, as they kind of navigate their own lives and all these kind of peculiar circumstances that are happening. It's a really well-written novel, and he does a very good job of setting up all these characters and linking them all together. I'm gonna leave it there because I have both the vlog video and that video to check out if you're interested in hearing me talk more about it. After that, I read Lock Every Door, which is by Riley Sager. His book Home Before Dark has been everywhere this spooky season, I guess. That was the one that I wanted to read, but I couldn't find it at my library, so I got this one, which is actually, people say, his best work. And it follows a young girl who moves into this building in New York as essentially like an apartment sitter, but there seems to be like something peculiar going on in the building. It's a very good thriller, even though I did find maybe not the twist as obvious, but like who the villain was a little bit obvious. But a very well written book, and I would definitely probably check out other books by him as well. After that, I finished the book, one of the 2 actual physical books I have with me, Northanger Abbey, which is by Jane Austen. This is actually the first Jane Austen novel that I have ever read. I don't know if I gave it 3 or 4 stars. The writing was really good. It made it easy enough to get through it. One of my favorite things about it is the fact that it makes fun a lot of those gothic tropes and things that get used a lot. So a lot of times you read literature from this like time period, it'll be like, and their mother, after having 5 children, died because that's all she was good for. And Jane Austen's like, well, actually, her mother lived a really long life and got to see her kids do all these great things, and she didn't die like you would expect. So some of that like satire element, as someone who studies literature and has to look at a lot of this stuff, was really, really funny to me. The female characters in this book are interesting. Catherine frustrated me a little bit because I was like, girl, this man is trying to get with you. How blind are you? Why can you not see any of these things that are happening? So that was a little bit mildly frustrating to me throughout the book. Especially the book is called Northanger Abbey, and Northanger Abbey doesn't show up until probably 2/3 into the novel. But it's Jane Austen. I can't crap on her. My prof told me that I can't. I did enjoy it. Not a bad read. I will definitely check out other things by her because her writing is very good, and I find that's one of the biggest things with classics, is if the writing is very clunky or difficult, it can be impossible to get through it. After that, I finished up the book One in Every Crowd, which is by Ivan E. Cody. I also had to read this one for class. It is a collection of short stories about the author's life and their personal experiences. It was really good. With a lot of short story collections, I find this happens where there's stories that speak to me more than other ones. This one's a little bit different because it's autobiographical in nature. Some of the stories about queerness and having kids feel accepted and accepting that and embracing different expressions of gender as youth grow up, I thought was really important and really interesting. However, there are some times in the book that like they kind of lean towards some more like stereotypical understandings of queer identity and the way of like expressing yourself as a queer person, which I did find a little bit frustrating sometimes, but overall it was a very good book. So important to have representation out there. I will literally stand on rooftops and scream it until my voice is hoarse. Please, please continue to put out representations and tell stories so that kids know like they too can like be the most authentic version of themselves. So after this I started reading The Orange Eats Creeps, which is by Grace Krilanovich. I hope I said that right, and I had a really hard time getting through this book. So partway through that I stopped and I read the webcomic Long Exposure, which is by Cam Mars Hayward. The Mars part is in like little quotations because I think that's pen name that they uses. So this is an incredible webcomic. I really loved it. I read it in one sitting and then I made fan art about it because I'm crazy. But one of the things that, okay, hold up before I go on a 10-hour tangent about this. Let me tell you what the story is about. So this story follows Mitch and Jonas, who are two high school teenagers. Wow, Maddie. Shocking that people in high school are teenagers. But they're two kids who are in high school and they end up going to this kind of like shady government building near them, which ends up giving them superpowers. So they kind of have to navigate that. And of course, as they kind of work together, there might be a little something more going on there between the two of them. I was actually kind of nervous about reading this one. I think part of it is just the picture that's on the front cover is like Mitch basically like having Jonas in a headlock, and the way that the story description is written is it says that like Mitch is essentially Jonas's childhood bully. And I'm not a fan of especially relationship stories that develop like from those kind of beginnings, because I'm like, abusive behavior, let's not normalize this and discuss it in that way. But if you actually read the webcomic, it turns out that they were friends, and then as Mitch struggles with his own identity and not knowing how to process it, then unfortunately he does turn to bullying Jonas, but he does a really good job of apologizing about it and being open and honest about trying to become a better person. And that's one of the very nuanced conversations that happens a lot in this webcomic, is whether or not people are good or bad. There's a quote from it that I wrote down where Jonas is talking to Mitch and he's saying like he realizes he's not a bad person, that people aren't black and white, they're a lot more like colors, which, not to get into my literary brain, but most of the like webcomic is in black and white, and there are certain scenes that are in colors. But Jonas's power is that he can use these kind of like waves of light, and the waves of light are always done in color. And I was literally lying awake one night and I was like, Jonas is Mitch's color, and like I just got real sad and emotional about it because I was like, that's so wholesome. And this is why I need to be monitored when I'm reading, because shit like this happens. I literally just the other day I got an update for a different webcomic I'm reading and just like started sobbing at the kitchen table. It's fine. I'm okay. Everything's good. But yes, I did give it 4 stars because my only issue with it was some of the very difficult things that happen in this novel don't get delved into a lot. Mitch struggles with an eating disorder, and besides one instance where like you see Jonas hears him throwing up and later on he's like weak and Jonas is like kind of urging him to eat and it's like, oh, like I know what's going on here. It never really gets addressed again, and I kind of wish that they would delve into that conversation a little bit more. There is a lot of other really heavy content in it, including like pedophilia and child sexual assault, so just a heads up for that. Although the author, they do a really good job of making sure that he puts in content warnings throughout the work as needed. So that's always good to make sure that you're checking in with yourself and taking care of your own mental health. But yes, Long Exposure is almost finished and I am so impatient to wait to read the ending because I love these boys with my whole heart. They have a special place in there. They live rent-free in my mind. Is that what the kids are saying these days? Yeah, Mitch and Jonas live rent-free in my mind. So after that, I went back to the disaster that is The Orange Eats Creeps. I gave it 2 stars because I didn't hate it enough to be able to like rant about it for hours. It follows slutty hobo vampire junkies, which sounds fascinating, but the book is essentially one really long monologue told in like disjointed order by the protagonist, and it's so hard to follow in terms of trying to figure out what's happening. So 1 minute she's with this group of vampires that she's been hanging out with for a long time, and next thing you know she's in like some convenience store somewhere. So it was difficult to follow, and then also I just felt like I didn't really get what the message of the story was. Plus, like, by the 10th time you're reading about people doing weird ass hookups in grimy gas station bathrooms, I'm like, this is enough information for me. I'm too like, no, thank you. So that was one that I had set aside for like kind of my Halloween spooky theme reading, and I did not vibe with it. Like, they just talk about the way that the vampires just give everyone STDs because they're like, well, we can't die from it ourselves, and I'm like, is this like a social commentary? Is this just a joke? I don't know. I think there's a lot of mixed thoughts on it from when I was looking at the Goodreads review, so at least I'm not alone in my confused opinions. After that, I read another relatively short book, which is We Have Always Been Here by Samra Habib. I hope I'm saying that right, and it is a queer Muslim author, which is done by I believe she's a Canadian citizen, I don't know. She was born in Pakistan and then moved to Canada. This is one of the towns near where I live. They do like a one book, one city type thing, and this is the book that they've chosen, so I'll be able to get to hear her speak. I don't think it's until maybe January or February. So I wanted to read it, plus it was also my pick for Canada Reads, even though I hadn't read it. And it ended up winning Canada Reads. I don't think that's a spoiler at this point. It was a really good book. I loved it. I thought that so much of what she had to say was so fascinating, and the complicated ways that she looks at family and religion and queer identity and the ways that those all intersect with one another is really interesting. And I think there's just a lot of really important pieces in there about learning to accept yourself and forgive difficult parts of your life that you go through. She also has some really great conversations about love and platonic relationships being really important, which the fact that our society values romantic relationships more than friendships is a problem, but I won't give you my 20-minute TED Talk on that. We will leave that for now. It's so well done, so brilliantly written. I don't know if I can say more than that without getting super into spoilers, but I would definitely recommend you check it out. Like I said, it is fairly short. I had a difficult time getting into it just because I was in a bit of a reading slump, which I don't like to call them that, but whatever, a reading pause when I came back from reading week. I didn't really read a lot. I was having a hard time focusing, which is kind of why I was diving into those webcomics, because I find for me I can get through them really quickly and I get very invested in them, if you couldn't tell from my description of Long Exposure. But once I was able to sit down and actually focus on this novel, I like blew through the rest of it in one day, and I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to hear her speak. Maybe I'll do a little video about it afterwards if that's something that people are interested in. Alright, last book. Are we at the 30-minute mark yet? I don't know. So the very last book that I read this month was another webcomic, which is called On a Sunbeam. and it is by Tilly Walden. I gave it 3 stars. I probably would give it 3.5. My joke pitch for this is lesbians in space, but the actual pitch of what this book is about is it's about this crew that's going through the deepest reaches of space to rebuild these old buildings. So the main character, Mia, just starts with this new crew, but the real reason that she's kind of been venturing out into space is because she's trying to find Grace, who was her close friend in school and her long lost love. She wants to be able to reconnect with her and kind of apologize for like what happened in the past without getting into it too much. It does have a really amazing cast of characters, including the fact that we have not 1 but 2 lesbian relationships. We also have a non-binary character throughout the book, and I really take joy out of every time that one of the characters loses it on someone being like, you mean they, right? Like, how many times do I have to tell you it's they? It's not that hard for you to respect L's pronouns, please. So I took a lot of enjoyment out of that. I was like, yes, please shut down these annoying ass bigots. But overall, the sci-fi fantasy element of it was really fascinating, but I wanted a little bit more of the lore and the development, and because of that I did find it a little bit difficult to get as invested in the story and what was going on, because there's these really interesting things like this game Lux that they talk about, but I didn't feel that I had enough background of it to like fully understand and be invested in the world. But it was still a good read. It was very enjoyable. It got me through work, and I was like reading it at 1 a.m. without falling asleep, so that is saying something. The problem with these videos is I'm always like just finishing a book in like whatever month it is that I'm filming it in. So like this is an October wrap up, but I just finished a book in November, and I really want to talk about it because I love it so much, and I'm like so excited because I just finished it. I was actually tearing up a little bit as I like went back to reread one of the pages of this last webcomic I just read. But I won't talk about it. We'll save it for my November wrap up. Oh, waving the blanket like that was not good. It brought all the cold air back in. Okay, so I will shut up now and leave you after this very long, slightly chaotic video. So those are the books that I read in October. If you've read any of these books, please leave me a comment down below with your thoughts on it. I've always loved to engage with people about the books that they're reading and hear what different perspectives people might take away from some of the things that we've read. Besides that, I am currently trying to figure out what I'm going to read in November. I got a couple new books. I'm a little all over the place. I don't know if I'll do a November TBR just because of that. Maybe I will, because, you know, I didn't really follow my October TBR, but if you like those TBR videos, please let me know and I will make them. Besides that, if you have any book recommendations for me, other content, anything else you'd like to see, please leave me a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe and like these videos if you like them, and ring the bell so you get notifications every time I post a video and you can listen to me babble even more. In the description box down below I will have the links to my art Instagram, my blog, which I update every Sunday, and I need to do that for this week, and my Goodreads if you want to follow along with what I'm reading as I'm reading it. With that being said, this is the awkward part where I never know how to end the video. So I hope you all are having a lovely time. You had a spooky Halloween and you're getting ready for the Christmas season, though not till November 12th because of Remembrance Day. And I will talk to you all shortly.